Hello everyone, welcome to the Well-Minded Knitting Podcast. My name's April and today is my very first podcast episode. And looking around on the bed, we have quite a bit to talk about. So first, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction about myself. We're going to talk about my finished objects, my whips, a little bit of sock talk, and we're also going to talk about some mindsets that I want to take this year in order to keep my relationship with knitting happy and healthy. So first I'm going to do a bit of an introduction about myself. My name's April. I live in Cleveland, Ohio with my husband and my 3 cats. I am definitely crazy cat lady status. Their names are Luma, Jax, and Goose, and I will maybe try to insert pictures of them here because if you're like me, I'm sure you'd love to see pictures of cats. So my background is that I'm an analyst in the tech industry and I'm currently taking a break from work, so I'm actually unemployed, which is why I'm using this time to start filming knitting podcasts. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and now I have the time to do it. And I'm super excited to share my knitting journey with you here. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. All right, so we're gonna get started with actually a finished object that I realized I forgot to include. So I actually already filmed a video. I filmed an everything I knit in 2024. So if you haven't watched that, please check it out. But today, when I was getting ready for this video and I was going through my bag, I had realized that I actually forgot one of my finished objects. And that is this guy. This tiny little fish. So I'm sure you've seen this because a lot of people have knit it after Florence Miller talked about it on her podcast, and that is what inspired me to knit it as well. So this is the Ribka pouch, and it is by the Rat Sea Witch, and it is just this super, oops, I have a fuzz on it, and it's just this super cute little fish pouch. And it's just made out of garter stitch, and then it's crocheted together, and it has this cute little button eye that you put on. And it's actually a functional pouch. So what I keep in here, because I actually have on the bed, is a lip gloss. And I stick it in the pouch. And I actually have this hanging off of my tote bag. I loop it around the handle, and it just hangs off the edge of my tote bag since I'm always reapplying my lip products. This was just knit from some scrap yarn that I had and some leftover mohair. And even though it's something so tiny, I actually didn't knit it that quickly. I think it took me 2 days to knit this, and I thought I could finish it in an evening, and that just wasn't the case. But it was just a super quick, satisfying knit, and it's definitely something that I would knit again as a gift. I just think this would be such a cute gift to give someone, and it doesn't take that much yarn, and in the grand scheme of gift knits, it's pretty tiny and quick. So I just wanted to get that out of the way before we moved on with the rest of the video. So first we're going to talk about what I'm wearing, which is actually my first finished object. So this is a Port Sweater by Ozetta or Hayley Smedley. This is a worsted weight pattern, and it's a classic drop shoulder construction, but it has some really beautiful rib detailing on the drop shoulder here, and it also features a mock neck. Fits up to a 60-inch bust. I have mine knit in a size large, which should give about a 50-inch finished circumference, which gives me about 8 inches of positive ease. I knit mine in 2 strands of Nutiden, and this is the color Morker, which is just a beautiful, rich burgundy color. And this just makes for a super light, lofty sweater. So I love how this sweater turned out, and I've worn it a couple times now, but I do have one issue. So as you can see here on the neck, it kind of flares out a bit. And I was actually looking at the pattern photos that Hayley Smedley has, and hers kind of does it too, but it's hard for you to see that in the photos because she has her hair tucked into the collar. So it makes it less apparent because the hair sort of fills in what would be like the empty space I have on mine here. I did actually redo a portion of this collar once before because this calls for a tubular bind off, and if you've ever knit with unspun yarn, doing a tubular bind off in unspun yarn is not the easiest thing to do. So when I had done that, it was just really uneven and bumpy, and it did not look good. So I actually ripped that out, and then I redid the end of this collar here, just binding off in pattern. I still kept the setup rows for the tubular bind off, but then I just bound off in pattern. And probably what I wish I would done, I think I wish I would have knit the collar in a smaller needle size just so you can see it would sit a little closer, and I just think that would look a bit better. Probably my plan now, since I don't really like to rip out unspun, since when you rip it out, it kind of like elongates, like stretches out the fibers a bit. So the yarn not only becomes a little bit thinner, but it becomes a little unstable. So my plan is either to add some elastic on the inside here so it cinches in, or I may actually just fold this over and make it a double folded collar and sort of whip stitch it down here. I'm not sure yet because I do like it how it is. I just don't know if it's how I would prefer it. So that's something I'm going to keep in mind for the future here, and maybe something I'll go back and fix. Okay, the next finished object we're going to be talking about is this one. This is the Brume sweater by Andrea Mowry. And this is just a classic raglan with a double folded, you can see it's folded in here, a double folded mock neck. And this is the color. So I knit mine in one strand of Nutiden and one strand of Sari, lace weight Sari. The color of the Nutiden strand in here is called Sona, and the Sari strand is Fireheart. And this just makes the most beautiful fabric. I mean, to me, this is like olive oil. It's just so beautiful. But I love how this turned out. I really love the raglan on this with a simple raglan line, and I just think where it sits on me is quite nice. And when I first knit this up, I had the same collar concerns that I had with the Port sweater by Ozetta. I thought maybe it just sat a bit funny, but after I wore this, it really had some nice drape in it. And I think that's thanks to the Sari. I think without the Sari, I would have had the same issue with the collar here. I would say though that if I knit this again, I wish I had like 1 or 2 rows less in the collar. I wish it was just ever so slightly shorter, but since it's sort of relaxed with time here, it's not so much of an issue. For this sweater, I did go up 1 needle size in the sleeves, and that's mostly just because I noticed when I started knitting the sleeve, and I noticed that my gauge looked a bit smaller than it did on the body, so I just ripped back and went up a needle size to correct that issue. But I absolutely love how this sweater turned out. I just think the color on this is so beautiful. The next finished object that I'm going to talk about is not one that I'm going to talk about for very long because I am sure you have all seen a million of these. So I knit a Sophie scarf, and I followed the repeats in the pattern for this, but I just did what a lot of people do. I knit till I thought I was about halfway through my yarn and then finished it out. I also sort of kept in mind where I wanted it to finish. So I wanted mine to be able to wrap around and then tie in the front. And I just sort of, as I was knitting, I held it up to my neck and then I'm halfway, and then I want to wrap it around and see if there was enough room to tie it in the front. And once I got to that point, I just started doing the decreases. So mine is knit in this sort of like army green color, and this is knit in a vintage angora that I bought secondhand off of eBay. I've worn this out a couple times now, and when I've worn it, my husband says it looks like a Grinch scarf. It also kind of reminds me of that character on Sesame Street who lives in the garbage can. What is his name? Something, it's like Mr. Grouch? Something to do with Grouch, I think. But I love this, even if it looks like a Grinch scarf. It looks so cute tied around. I'm sure I'll insert some video here of it. And I can see why people love this pattern. I would definitely love to knit more of these, and specifically in angora. I mean, this is so luxurious. This is the first time that I've knit in angora, and I absolutely love the fabric. I don't know if I would love a sweater entirely knit of this, because the fluff kind of gets everywhere. It's stuck all over my hands now. I'm gonna have to wipe it off on my leggings. I do not recommend knitting with angora when you have mascara on, because the fluff will just get caught in your mascara and irritate your eyes. But I do love this fabric, and I do think after blocking, the shedding has calmed down a little bit, but looking at my black leggings now, I can still see that it's shedding quite a bit. But this fabric is so luxurious. I highly recommend you try to get yourself some angora to knit one of these in, especially because it doesn't use too much yarn, because angora is a bit pricey. I do tend to keep an eye out for it on eBay, because it's quite a bit cheaper there to get vintage angora. So that's something I recommend, but you should definitely try out this yarn. And I actually have plans to knit more of those. I have plans to knit it in this beautiful red angora. This is actually 70% angora, 30% wool. I would love to knit one in this color similar to the size I have before. And then I also have this blue. And this blue is 100% angora. And I want to knit a slightly smaller one that just ties around once. And I am super excited to cast these on, also because the Sophie scarf just knits up so quickly. And I think the Sophie scarf is a good knit to show off yarn. Like, a lot of people give it criticism because it's just, I mean, it is. It's just a simple garter stitch scarf with some increases and some decreases and some I-cord finishing on the side. So it's definitely not a revolutionary pattern, but I think it's a great pattern to buy special yarn and to showcase the yarn, and it doesn't use much. So definitely recommend trying a Sophie scarf in angora. I have so much fluff on me. Talking about the angora not shedding. This is all that shed on me while I was talking about it. The next finished object I want to show you is some socks. And I apologize because I have worn them. You are not getting a fresh pair of socks right now. And they do have some fluff on them, so I'm going to remove that quickly. But these are just some vanilla socks, and these are knit in Woolens and Nosh yarn, which is a Targhee sock yarn, and this is the color Spectrum, and then it just has a teal mini that I used for the toe and the cuff and an afterthought heel. And like I said in my Everything I Knit in 2024, this is actually a languishing whip that I had. This languished in a project bag for like 6 months because I had never knit an afterthought heel before, and the thought of doing it just seemed so daunting. And then when I did finally decide to finish these in December, because I didn't want them sitting around into the new year, doing the heels only took 1 day. So I let this sit around when I could have had finished socks for something that literally only took 1 day. So definitely, if you are worried to try an afterthought heel, it is super easy. I will say, after completing these and wearing these a couple times now, afterthought heels aren't my favorite. So I don't know if you have ever, so there was that one point that I was running pretty frequently, and I don't know if you've ever been to a running store and you can go and they do like the foot analysis. You like stand on this pad and they do an analysis of the shape of your foot. And I had done one of those before, and I actually discovered that, so I have very wide feet. So like on the scale of general population, I have extremely wide feet for my foot size, but I also have extremely narrow heels. So the afterthought heel, I just think doesn't sit as narrow. I think it sits a little bit wider at the heel of the foot. So for me, the afterthought heel sort of just slides around and it doesn't feel secure. And it's definitely not that the sock isn't long enough in pulling at the heel. The heel just feels like it just sort of sits really loose and doesn't hug my heel nicely. So definitely, if you're really into sock knitting, I would actually recommend you going and getting a foot analysis at one of those running stores just to see what your feet are like, because it can be really helpful information for sock knitting, because I really do think that's why the afterthought heel doesn't fit me very well. I still love and will wear this pair of socks, but I probably won't give an afterthought heel a try again unless it's something in like a Colorwork sock pattern where it would be hard to adapt to another heel. All right, now we're gonna get into whips, and the first whip I have is in this really cute project bag. This is actually one of my recent acquisitions, and it's just this patchwork project bag in this super fun like 70s fabric. My favorite thing about this project bag is actually the like star print at the top. I just think it's so cute. It kind of reminds me of like a print you'd see at a circus. And then in this sock project bag, I also have a super colorful sock to match the project bag. So this is knit in a self-striping sock yarn. This is Nomadic Yarns Confetti in their tweed base, and it is just such a fun colorway. I just wanted a really bright and cheerful sock to knit on right now. And the contrast color on here is actually from this past Christmases, like the Christmas we just had, Chelsea Luxe Yarn Advent. I don't know what color this is though, because when I put away the mini skeins, all I did was sort of tuck the day sticker into the skein, like under the loop where it loops over itself. And this unfortunately was either 6 or 9. I cannot tell which it was. And I was trying to read her, so her advents come with like a color card that you can reference to see what the color is. And based on the names, I still cannot figure out if this is from day 6 or day 9. So not sure, but it's a really beautiful creamy white color. So like I said, this is a vanilla sock, and I just have some 2x2 rib at the top, and then my favorite heel, which is a slip stitch heel. I love how this fits on my super narrow heel. I just think it hugs and sits really nice and secure. I actually think I forgot to mention on the other sock and on this sock, I use a US 0 and I do a 64 stitch sock. I did unfortunately realize when I was knitting on it this morning that I had dropped a stitch in the cuff. So I actually have a stitch marker here marking where I dropped a stitch, and I'm going to have to figure out, I've never duplicate stitched to fix a dropped stitch, but I'm gonna have to learn how to do that for this. Also, in regards to this sock, I just want to give a tip for when you're doing a contrast heel. So for a slip stitch heel, the first row, typically you would slip stitches in the heel, but if you do that when you're doing a contrast, you wouldn't have a completely clean line here. You would kind of see the color dip in with the slip stitches. So what you can do to fix that is I just do 2 plain rows of knitting so you get back to a knit side. So I'll knit a row in stockinette, and then I'll purl a row, and then the next row is when I'll start slipping stitches, and that is what gives the clean transition into the contrast heel. And then something else that I do when I'm knitting socks is, so when you do a slip stitch heel along the edge here, you'll actually pick up stitches, and sometimes that can give you a hole right at the corner that forms here. And what I do to combat that is I just pick up a stitch between them, like between the two, like what would be here in the last row of the stripes. I pick up a stitch between there in order to eliminate that hole. So yeah, these are just some super fun and colorful vanilla socks that I'm working on, and I am so excited to have these. The next work in progress I have is actually in a bag by the same bag maker as the one that I had before. So this bag and the bag that I showed before for my previous sock are from the same Etsy shop, and they're called 216 Knits. And I love this bag too. It's just a cute quilted bag with a wax bottom. So in here I have, apparently I am halfway through a row. Oops. So in here I have Poet Socks by Sari Nordlund. These are just a beautiful lace sock. This is a super popular sock pattern, and I can see why. This is the first time that I've knit a lace sock, and this is just so enjoyable to see grow. It's really satisfying, and it's nice too because unlike a sweater, you see this grow quite quickly, and I think that's helpful because honestly, you don't really see the pattern form on this until you get to about like right here. You can't really appreciate how pretty it is. So my Poet sock is knit in Woolberry Cozy Sock, and this is the color Kindred Spirits, and it's just a beautiful color for this pattern. Although I love how this sock is turning out, it's not the most relaxed sock knitting. So if you're someone like me who likes to knit a lot of vanilla socks or self-striping socks just for like something easy and relaxing to do, this is not that. The Poet Socks is not something easy and relaxing to knit. I guess that's not true. The Poet Socks are not hard. I think that if you've knit a pair of socks before, you can knit these, but I will say they're a bit tedious because it's not a distinct repeat that you can just memorize and just keep on knitting. It's definitely something that you have to have the chart in front of you and keep referencing in order to knit it, but it is beautiful. I highly recommend this pattern. I think it's popular for a reason, and I'm really excited to see what it will look like blocked. Something else to mention with these is I normally knit my socks with like the Chow fixed circular needles, and I'm actually knitting these with C-knit wooden needles, and this is the first time that I'm knitting socks with anything other than the Chow, and I actually love these. So if you're someone who loves to knit with wood needles, I highly recommend trying the C-knit needles for socks. I just think they're super nice. Apparently this is just the episode where I want to showcase all of my project bags. This is actually a wash bag that I got from a gift store at the base of Old Man Store on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. And it's like this oilcloth fabric, and it has these super cute Highland cows on them. And I love this. I think when you're a knitter, you're like always looking for cute, well, at least if you're me, you're always looking for cute bags to put knitting into. This is that. So in here, I actually have a project that I'm knitting on with yarn that I got from Isle of Skye. So on the Isle of Skye, there's a very cute yarn store. I believe it's pronounced Shilzadare. And I bought some of her, she does botanically dyed yarn, and I am knitting these. They're Colorwork mittens, so I have a lot of yarn connected to it. I am knitting these beautiful Colorwork mittens. These are the Portree mittens, and they are by a knitwear designer called Karie Westermann. I absolutely love these. So this is knit with Shilzadare Tuath yarn, Tuath, which is a 2-ply Shetland base. And like I said, she botanically dyes them, and they're such beautiful colors. The yarn she dyes is so beautiful. So the only yarn in here that isn't the 2-ply Shetland from Shilzadare is this bottom color that I used for the ribbing that appears in the Colorwork a little bit. This is actually Ralma Phenol that I just had in stash that I decided to pair with this. So this is the first time that I'm knitting a mitten, and knitting a Colorwork mitten is so satisfying. I could see why people like to do this. So this is going to be a fingerless mitt, and I'm just very excited to have this finished object. The color work on here is super easy. You're only ever holding 2 strands at a time, and the repeats of color I think are decently long, so you're not switching too often. I would definitely say this pattern's well written. The chart is super easy to read. There's not too many sizes, and she does the, like a lot of people do with the mittens, where the size changes by switching needle sizes. But definitely, if you like this color work pattern, I recommend this knitting pattern. And it's also nice because she's a small designer, so it's nice to support that. So part of the reason I picked this pattern is because when we were in that yarn store, I believe she had a sample knit up in these in similar colors, and I absolutely loved how like fun and playful it looked. So I was definitely inspired to recreate this. And it's nice too because I had souvenir yarn, and I'm knitting this in a pattern called Portree, which is actually like the main city on the Isle of Skye, the main town. So this is just a great memento from my vacation. Continuing on the trend of showing you my bag, just because I also love this bag and I love this bag maker. So this is the bag, and this is a Fat Squirrel bag. I love her bags. She does shop updates pretty often, and she makes some of like the biggest, roomiest bags. I just think these fit sweater products really well, and she always chooses such cute fabrics. She also has a knitting podcast if you want to check it out. But yeah, this is Fat Squirrel. And in this bag, I actually have 2 projects that I'm going to talk about. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about has a million stitch markers on it. This is the Rhett beanie by Meghan Babin, and it has some beautiful cabling. You can just see the beginning of my cabling on here. It has a million stitch markers on it because I'm using stitch markers to mark out the pattern repeat of the cable chart. This is a pretty classic worsted weight cable knit hat pattern. I mostly picked it because I wanted something that would go well with this yarn. This is a dark green tweed yarn, and this is a Shanico wool with, I believe the tweedy neps are nylon. I have the ball band in here. They are acrylic and rayon, the neps are. And this is from Meridian Mill House. This is actually the mill that I believe most people are getting their Shanico wool and fiber for hand dyeing. So definitely something to check out if you wanted to get some fiber for spinning or some undyed yarn. And they do often have dyed yarns like this is. I believe it's things that maybe they're testing and they didn't end up liking for production. I don't know if they sell to like textiles or whatnot, but it's a super spongy yarn. And I actually bought a sweater quantity of this that I'm gonna show in my acquisitions. And like you can see on the ball band, it's pretty affordable. Like this was $8.24 for non-superwash Shanico in a 100-gram ball. Back to the hat pattern. The only issue I have with this hat pattern, I actually looked through some of the project pages on Ravelry, and other people have this issue as well. So I have a big head. Like I have a 23-inch circumference head, which is big. I have a big head. And I was trying this on after I knit the ribbing, and I was like, man, this is pretty loose. And I have a big head, and I'm knitting this for my husband. And I actually think his head isn't much smaller than mine. So this didn't fit. This wasn't going to fit our big heads. Like you'd need a bigger head to fill this hat pattern without changing it. So if you have a big head or you know someone with a big head, this is the pattern for you. But what I did to adjust the size is I actually just went down a needle size everywhere except for the tubular cast on. So I kept the tubular cast on needle the same, which I believe is a US 4 or 3.5 millimeter. And then I just went down a needle size in the ribbing, and I went down a needle size in the cables as well. And this seems now, and now trying this on, this seems like it will fit pretty well on my big head and on my husband's big head. I will say that going down a needle size did make the cabling on this a little tough on my hands, which is probably why I'm knitting this so slowly for a hat. But I do think it helped a lot with the sizing, and I recommend that you do that. I did see people with smaller size heads, what they did, so they just kept the needle size the same and then removed a chart repeat. Probably if you were going to do that, I wouldn't do that unless you had smaller, unless you had like a 21-inch circumference head or smaller. That probably would be when I would recommend you do that, because I think if you had a larger head than 21 inches and you removed a whole pattern repeat, even with keeping the needle size the same, I think it might be kind of small, maybe a bit snug. So that's just something to keep in mind if you decide to knit this hat pattern, that it runs a bit big and you'll have to do some finagling with it to get it to fit. But it does look like it's turning out quite beautifully. So this pattern is only the second time that I've done a tubular cast on. The first time I did it was for the Traveler hoodie by Andrea Mowry, and she actually does it without waste yarn, which after doing this, so this hat does the tubular cast on with waste yarn, I can see the benefits of both. So when you do the waste yarn tubular cast on, you have to like unpick the waste yarn, which is a bit tedious. But when you do it without the waste yarn, it's really like unstable on the needles and it's really hard to keep track of, even in long circumference. So I actually don't know if I had to do tubular cast on again, which one I would choose. If I would do it with the waste yarn or without the waste yarn. If you actually know of any better way to do tubular cast on, I would love to know. Or if you could tell me your favorite way to do tubular cast on. We will see when that time comes what I end up choosing, if I choose it with waste yarn or without. Okay, so after this, now we're going to get into my garment whips. My first sweater I have is actually living in the same project bag as my last project. So I am knitting the Chestnut sweater by PetiteKnit, which is a DK weight sweater that has a fold over turtleneck collar, and it's just a basic drop shoulder with sort of a roomier fit. And this is mine. So I actually worked on this morning and I finally connected. I actually tried to get this connected so it would be easier to show in the podcast. So this is mine. I am super excited for this sweater. This is actually part of my Make 9. I'm like tentatively thinking about a Make 9. I haven't definitively made one, but it's in my mind for something that I wanted to knit this year. So I'm glad that I got it started. And I chose to do this in a size large, which should give me a 51 1/4 inch finished bust, which should give me 9 1/4 inch of finished ease. I think she recommends 10 to 11 inches of ease on this, but I was sort of between sizes. And I think once I get through the yoke here, I'll give it a try on. And if I think maybe it's not as roomy as I wanted it to be, that I will just cast on some stitches like in the underarm to make it bigger. I don't really see that being that big of an issue with this pattern. So the yarn that I am using with this is Knitting for Olive Mohair in soft blue, and then also some Oolong Mira that I had in stash in the color Mist. So as you can see, these are quite different colors. Here is the Oolong yarn. I should have grabbed a skein of this, but hopefully you can see it well. This is a very like denim-y blue color, and it's a bit muddy, like a bit blurred in the color. And the Knitting for Olive is a very clear, soft blue color. And I just think together that these make a beautiful fabric. I just think the soft blue Knitting for Olive Mohair really gives some clarity to the other color, and so beautiful. I thought for a second that I saw a dropped stitch, which I've had quite a few. Often when I knit with 2 strands of something, I notice that I drop one of the yarns, so I thought I did that like way down here, but I didn't. So this is actually the first time that I'm knitting with Knitting for Olive Mohair. Not as soft as I expected it to be. This is so I think what's nice about the Knitting for Olive Mohair, like I've seen other people say, is the color range is amazing. Like most likely, unless you're looking for a super bright color, you will find a color in Knitting for Olive Mohair that will work with your project. And what's nice about this is it has quite a matte finish. Actually, let me grab the mohair for my other project. So the other sweater project I'm working on, I'm using Issair silk mohair in this pink color. And I don't know if you'll be able to see in camera, but the Knitting for Olive mohair is quite matte in comparison, which is nice. Like, I think it's nice to have a different aesthetic option, but it's not as soft. Like the Issair mohair is definitely softer. So if softness is a concern of yours, the Issair mohair is definitely the softest that I have used. And it gives quite a nice sheen to projects. I do kind of like that. So the Issair mohair is nice and it's matte, and it adds a fuzziness to a project. But the Issair mohair adds a bit of a sheen and a silkiness to a project. So definitely different textures to consider what you want to add to your project. My preference is the Issair, but I do see the place of the Knitting for Olive, and I'll definitely use this again. And if the Knitting for Olive mohair is something that you really like, another mohair I've used that reminds me of this is the Rowan Kid Silk Haze. So if you like this, I would definitely try the Rowan Kid Silk Haze. And what's different about that yarn in comparison to this is that yarn is way fuzzier. Like the fuzzy halo you get from Kid Silk Haze is crazy. So definitely if you're looking for a super fuzzy mohair and you like the Knitting for Olive, I would try the Rowan. But yeah, I'm super excited to finish this chestnut sweater and have it as a finished object. I just think it'll be really nice and cozy and easy to wear. And this is something that I hope to finish by the beginning of February. Like I want this finished soon. And soon I'm going to be in the body and in the round, and I imagine that it'll go by pretty quickly. Okay, my next whip is the Miles Shirt Jacket by Ozetta. And I'll show you the bag this is in as well. This is my favorite project bag to knit with Nutiden, just because it's so big and it fits so much. And also it's really structured, which makes it easy, like when I'm zipping it up, to not accidentally zip the strands of Nutiden. And this is by a bag maker called HeidiWest. And she lets you do custom fabric combinations. So like I picked the tulip design to go with this olive canvas, and I love this bag. I also love that it stays open, so you can set it and the top will stay open, so if you wanted you could knit from the bag itself. And in here you can see my Nutiden. So this is my Miles shirt jacket by Ozetta, and it's kind of at a hard place to show right now because it's scrunched up at needles here, but I am almost done with the body before you get to the body shaping, because if you've ever seen pictures of the Miles shirt jacket, it kind of has a dip in the back and the front, almost to that point with this. And I'm knitting mine in a size large, which should give a 52-inch bust, which would give me about 10 inches of positive ease. I think that Ozetta recommends 11 to 12 inches of positive ease on this, so I'm just gonna have slightly less, but I didn't really want to size up to the next size. And I am knitting mine in 2 strands of Nutiden. The color, I will try to pronounce it. I probably won't be able to, so I'll put it on the screen. It's Livslinge? Livslinge? That's the best I got. So I'm knitting it in 2 strands of Nutiden and also the Issair silk mohair that I just showed before. And this is in the color 62. Can you hear my cat crying? My cat's actually crying because my husband should be home soon, and normally around like 4 p.m. is when she starts crying for him. Luma? But like I said, I am knitting this in 2 strands of Nutiden and 1 strand of silk mohair, and this is the first time that, and this I think is the first time that I'm knitting Nutiden with mohair, and I actually love this. This is my favorite lace weight that I've held with Nutiden. I just think it adds such a nice silkiness to the fabric. The silk mohair has made it really soft. And I have some sweaters in stash with Nutiden that I plan on holding with silk mohair. And now I'm really excited to knit those because this makes such a beautiful fabric. This is also one that I'm hoping I can knock out at the beginning of February because I'd really like to get knitting on some of the other sweaters I want to knit. So we'll see if I can reach that goal with this. I also want to say this is the second Ozetta pattern that I'm knitting now, and her patterns are just so clear and easy to read. I definitely recommend her patterns. This has been a super enjoyable knit, and I'm excited to see more of the details form as I continue knitting this. It already has like this beautiful shoulder detailing at the back here, and probably by the next time I podcast, we'll be able to see how the bottom formed, and maybe I'll have some sleeves on this. But yeah, definitely recommend Ozetta patterns. All right, so that's it for the finished objects. But next I want to talk about some knits that I'm dreaming about. So recently on Ravelry, I saw these mittens. I'm gonna put them on the screen. These are the Margaret mittens by Tricot Margaret. And they are so beautiful, so beautiful. Look at these mittens. I want to knit these so badly. I think they've only been on Ravelry a couple days and I've already bought them. So these are one of the mittens that they do the size changes by changing the weight of yarn and the needle. And it comes in 2 options where you can have a pointed tip or a rounded tip. And it just has the most beautiful color work, like daisy on the front. They look so beautiful. And I plan on knitting these in Nutiden. So I think the color scheme that I'm gonna go with the mittens is this. I think it actually only calls for 3 colors, but I'm gonna try to do it with 4. So I would like this color to be the base of the mitten, the white to be the stem, the pink to be the flower petals, and the yellow to be the center of the flower. And it's nice too because this pink Nutiden actually has some yellow streaks mixed into it, so I think it ties in well with this. And I want to cast these on so badly, but I don't want to get too whip crazy. Not too whip crazy, but we'll see. I may cast these on tonight or tomorrow. because I'm just so excited for them. And I think they'll be so nice in these colors. And Nugedin is so lovely and squishy. Yeah, so this is a knit I'm dreaming of currently. These lovely Margaret mittens in Nugedin. I think they'll be so nice. So I'm sure you've all seen the Eun sweater. This has been all over the internet, and this is beautiful too. I would maybe like to knit this as well, but I would like to knit the Eun sweater light, and I'm actually very inspired to knit a Valentine sweater right now. I just want something floaty and romantic, so I'm very inspired to knit the Eun sweater light right now. So the Eun sweater light is by NovemberKnits, and I'm just very inspired to knit this pattern right now. She has this beautiful photo where she's holding, I think it's like hydrangeas, and it just makes the sweater, in my mind, appear like so floaty and romantic, and I really just want it to be a Valentine sweater. So that is the mindset that I'm approaching this sweater with, and it's a DK weight sweater, and I would really love to knit it in this yarn combination. So I'm sorry, because I actually bought these on a D-stash, and for some reason they don't have color names on them, but these are woolberry yarns, and this is just a sock weight and then a corresponding lace weight Sari, and this is what I would love to knit the Eun sweater light with. I just think it will be so lovely and romantic, and I really like the Eun sweater light because what makes a Eun sweater so interesting is that it has really dramatic ribbing. Like, the ribbing is super long on the body, and it also has a very long slit along the side, and I just think this combination will make it so nice and flowy and just, like I said, make a beautiful romantic drapey sweater. So this is something that I'm very excited to cast on. So the next sweater that I'm super excited about is a sweater that doesn't exist. It hasn't even gone through testing yet, but I saw Rosa Pomar posted it on Instagram, and I just can't get it out of my mind. So it is this absolutely beautiful sheath pattern sweater, and it is knit in Retrosaria Pegel, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is a woolly fingering weight yarn. And I would just absolutely love to test knit this whenever it comes out. This has just been living in my mind, so I just wanted to show it here, since it's something that I'm really thinking about and hoping I'll get the opportunity to test knit or just knit when it comes out. Okay, we're approaching the end of my video, which is good because I'm losing my voice, which happened the last time I filmed a video too. So maybe when I film these, I need to take like an intermission in between to get a drink and to rest my voice for like 10 minutes. But the next thing I want to talk about are some acquisitions. So the first thing I want to talk about is this Meridian Millhouse yarn. This is the same yarn that I'm knitting the Rhett hat in, but this is just in a beautiful wine color. It's called wine tweed. So beautiful wine color. And I bought this to knit the Amy sweater by PetiteKnit. I was inspired to knit it in a wine tweed color because of the Amy sweater that High Fiber Knits knit in a similar color to this, and hers just turned out so beautifully, so I wanted something similar. I believe hers is knit in a Knit Picks yarn. So I'm excited to see how this yarn turns out in this sweater. The next acquisition I want to show, I'm going to put up on the screen in some extra footage because I think it's going to be kind of hard to show these here on camera, but I bought some notions from a French company called Apolonnie, and I purchased from her because Curatorial Knits talked about her, and she has such beautiful stitch markers and progress keepers, and I really wanted to buy from her for these. These are row counters, like stitch marker row counters that you put on your needles, and you move between the loops as you do like increases and decreases. And these are the most beautiful row counters in the style that I've seen, so I'm super excited to use these. The next two acquisitions I have are from Nomadic Yarns, which is one of my favorite self-striping sock dyers, and I also love, she makes these sock cube bags. Mine's a bit misshapen. Let me fix it. But Nomadic Yarns makes these very cute little sock cube bags. This one has like some winter mushroom scenery on it. And these are one of my favorite sock bags to use because they fit a one skein sock project in here perfectly. And it also fits in the 5-inch needles that I use to do magic loop. And whenever she has a pattern that I love, I always buy one of her sock bags. So the next thing I have from her is a self-striking sock yarn. This is in a very beautiful colorway. It has a lot of really punchy primary colors in it, and I'm super excited to knit with this. And this is based off of Gilmore Girls. The color is Stars Hollow, and I'm currently rewatching Gilmore Girls, so maybe I'll cast these on to knit them while I'm rewatching. And this is just in her trusty sock base, which is like her standard sock base. And my last acquisition is something that came in the mail today, which was actually surprisingly hard to get because it's sold out a lot of places in the US right now. So this is a pattern book. This is Erin by Marie Wallen. And this has been quite popular in the knitting community right now for the sweater on the front. I believe it's Knitting a Good Yarn who has knit this, along with Curatorial Knits. I've seen her knit this too, and they both knit beautiful versions. And this is something that I would definitely love to knit. This is the Seton pullover. So I bought this for 2 patterns. Let's see if I can find them. So like I said, the Seton pullover, which I would love to knit in Nutiden, either held double or with a strand of mohair. And the other pattern that I would love to knit from here is this cardigan. Let's see if I can see the name. The Bamberg cardigan, right here. I would love to knit this as well. This is super beautiful. I'm a little disappointed that it's not a hardcover pattern book for the price, but I'm still very happy to have this. And that's it. That is my last acquisition. So the last thing I want to talk about before I release you guys and myself from this video is some mindsets that I want to keep in mind as I move through this craft this year, and I have 3 of them. And one of them is a very common saying, and that is, comparison is the thief of joy. I really want to try to not compare myself to people this year, whether it be through the quantity that people knit compared to me, how their knits turn out compared to me. I think when you're on a journey of learning something new or moving through a craft, that it's just important to not compare yourself to others, because it's just a really good way to take the joy out of something. Another mindset that I want to keep with my knitting this year is that my knits don't have to make a perfect Instagram feed. Like, they don't have to fit in a perfect aesthetic box. They don't have to be all neutral or all colorful. That I have different tastes, and sometimes my tastes don't fit in a perfect box, and they wouldn't make a perfect Instagram feed, but that's okay because I still like them. Like, sometimes I find it hard and I want to knit something just so everything will look nice together, but then I miss out on certain things. Like, sometimes I want to knit something super colorful and rainbow that looks like this, and sometimes I want to knit something super simple and neutral. So my camera cut off. But I do want to share my last knitting mindset that I want to take into the year, and that is that my knits have no timeline. Whatever pace that I finish a sweater at, or what I finish anything at, it's okay. If I want to put something away for a year and pick it up later, that's okay too. I just don't want there to be any pressure on my knitting. I want my knitting to be a relaxing thing for me, and really there's no pressure to finish something. Whether I finish something in 1 month or 5 years, it makes no difference. It doesn't have any actual impact, and that's just something that I want to keep in mind to keep knitting as relaxed as possible for me. And like I said, these are just some mindsets that I want to keep in mind through my knitting this year, and something that I wanted to share with you in case there's something that you want to consider with your crafting as well, in order to keep your mindset as happy and healthy around your hobby as you possibly can. And that's a wrap for my first video. Well, my first podcast episode. And if this is something you enjoyed, I would really appreciate if you liked the video and subscribed to the channel. And hopefully I see you in another one here soon. Bye.